Let's call to order the Wednesday, March 6th special city council meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Peterson,
Here.
and Mayor Brown.
Here. Please join. Oh, are we doing Pledge of Allegiance? Not on the agenda? Not today? Okay. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Staff has no changes.
Okay. Additional materials?
Staff did receive 2 emails related to today's agenda. They were published on the agenda packet online and they're available for review at the back of the room.
We'll move now to item 4, which is oral communications by members of the public. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council on any items not on today's agenda. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Goran Klapic. I play basketball almost every day at the Jade Street Park. It's a beautiful park. It's one of the most beautiful parks in the Santa Cruz County area, by the way. I play there and I see sometimes when I call the authorities gang signs or some other illegal activity going on. I served in the army overseas, so I know a little bit about such stuff that is going on. I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass or something, but what I'm just saying is it's a safe place for kids. You know, there is a kindergarten place there, I think, and parents are dropping off their kids to the playground, and there is basketball played. So that's all I want to say. Something else which is on my mind also, when I used to work security for Zelda's on the beach restaurant one time, we had problems with cocaine dealers here in Capitola at that point of view. I kept quiet about that, but I met with certain people and talked about them. I mentioned some names, and I hope that will change very soon, because cocaine is a really addictive substance and it should not be used for teenagers or even younger kids in our society. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you all. Take care.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to staff and city council comments. Do we have any staff comments? None? Any comments from city council members? No? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the item of the day, general government public hearings. Today's special meeting is to review fiscal year 24-25 budget principles and goals, and I will turn it over to staff.
All right. Good evening, Council and Mayor. This is always, I think, one of the kind of exciting times of the year for those of us policy wonks, because it's the opportunity for us to really talk about kind of what we're going to be working on this next year and where we're going as an organization. One of the things that we've done is we've established budget principles, goals, key projects. It's something we do every year. And we've identified in the past 3 high-level budget principles. So this is kind of an opportunity to take a look and make sure that those are still the principles that we have and we want to continue to use. We have policies around fiscal issues, policies around public improvements, and policies around public service. So the key fiscal policies, there's 3 of them. 1 is to maintain a balanced budget, and 2 is to use one-time revenues for one-time expenditures, and 3, that the budget plans for future expected cost increases and utilizes attainable revenue estimates. Basically, that we're basing our revenue long-term projections based on the best available information. Under public improvement projects, the goals are to maintain the city's infrastructure, providing maximum funding for the pavement management project, maintain and improve our natural environment and sustainable programs. And 3, ensure the maintenance and cleanliness of our facilities, including our sidewalks and streets. Then our public service goals are, number 1 is maintain and improve the accessibility and transparency of the government overall, our government, our little piece of it. Recognize the high priority that this community places on the public safety. And 3, always analyze future service level increases based on their sort of long-term financial impacts to ensure their fiscal sustainability. So those are kind of at the highest level, the 3 sort of pillars that we built the budget on. So every year we prepare an annual budget. And what happens at this meeting is an opportunity for council to provide feedback about those overall pillars and about whether or not what sorts of things you want to see as a priority in the next year's budget before we've printed it and we've begun the budget hearings. So it really helps the budget, really helps articulate what the council's goals are to the community. And it also, this process helps staff identify what really should be showing up in the budget. Next slide. To provide a refresher, I think you guys have all seen this before. We talk about sort of the overall principles as kind of a guide to the budget. The goals are high-level programs and initiatives, and then the projects end up being the line-by-line specifics that get implemented through the course of the budget process. So we're going to go back in time 2 years, and these are goals from 22-23 that are not yet completed. They are all in process, and rather than read to you, I think most council members and most community members know where we are with these. But if there's any specific questions about these, let me know, and we can have the department head come and answer kind of where we are on the project. If not, then we will go on to the goals from last year. All right. And you can see here's a summary of the goals from last year, kind of where we are, quick status report. Again, there's department heads here who can answer sort of status of these different projects for the ones that aren't yet completed. In some cases, we list complete when the budget is adopted. For example, the project to the Employee Down Payment Assistance Program. That is completed in the sense that we've designated the funding for it. Doesn't mean that the project is done and that the funds have been expended. So if there's no questions about where we are in these goals, go to the next slide. I think we have 3 slides of current year goals. Again, the same kind of thing with some of the completed projects, replenishing the emergency reserve, paying off the debt. Those were things that were done when we adopted the budget. And then the community center project is one that we'll touch on more a little bit later on in the presentation as we talk about goals for next year. And then these are the final sort of goals from last year. The pavement management project included the paving on Capitola Road, which has been completed. And then the Hill Bay project, which council just authorized us to move forward. I think it was last month. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about available funding and frankly, clear up something that I think may have been a little bit misleading in the staff report. When we were talking about the council's goals for fiscal year 22-23, we were pointing out the fact that there was $400,000 that hadn't been completed yet, but those projects have all been contracted. So when we were suggesting, I think, in the form that was in the staff report, that $400,000 was available for reallocation. It's not. Those projects are moving forward. So when we look at the funding that we have, the kind of the one-time funding in the general fund, you can see we have $100,000 in the employee down payment assistance program. We set aside funding for future capital improvement projects, which originally in the budget, I think was around, I want to say around $900,000. And we reduced it, you'll recall, a couple meetings ago when we allocated the $369,000 to the wharf. So there's $585,000 there. And then the operating contingency budget, which we generally try to keep about $500,000 available there, we reduced it by $430,000 at mid-year due to, as you'll recall, the decrease in revenues we experienced this year, as well as some of the increased overtime costs associated with natural disasters and some of the major crime incidents. So that brings us to a fund balance of around $801,000. Our historic fund balance target has been around $500,000. That's basically sort of the amount of money that we try to keep in the checking account to make sure that we have funding, because every year things come up and every year you don't know exactly how the revenue and expenditures will land. Also, if we keep the employee down payment assistance program, that would leave us with about $200,000 of available revenue to allocate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director, who's going to talk a little bit about kind of the long-term budget projections. Jim, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor. So the slide that's up there right now is our 10-year forecast. And along the top there, just kind of as way as background, our biggest expenditure as a city, every city across the state, is personnel. And one of our biggest challenges on the personnel side is the CalPERS unfunded actuarial liability. It's listed across the top. So each year CalPERS will tell us what our payment is for the next fiscal year and then project out for the next 5. So you can see right now, this coming year that we're getting ready to do a budget is 2.6 million. And then that grows out to about 3.5 in fiscal year 2030. Last year at this time, when we were showing these numbers, CalPERS was telling us that payment in fiscal year 2029 was going to be about 2.1 million. So they had a very bad year on their investment returns, and we're seeing a 62% increase on the projected CalPERS UAL payment. What I'll say about that is after the 26 through 30 numbers, I guarantee you will change again. It's just the way that this goes based on what their investment portfolio does. Last year, which is the number that they'll use for 26, they missed their target by about 1%. So we expect those numbers to go up slightly for 26 through, and then it'll be out through 31. But we're hopeful right now, CalPERS is doing pretty well. We're hopeful that they have a couple of good years in a row like they did previously, and we see those numbers out in those future years come back down in line with what we were looking at a year ago. But as of right now, this is kind of the best information that we have as far as forecasting and planning. And then once you get out past fiscal year 2030, you'll see we kind of show it flattening out and leveling and then decreasing. That is, as CalPERS, this is really tied to the classic members that were hired before 2013. So as those employees start cycling out of the system, that UAL number will come down out beyond this 10-year forecast. Below the CalPERS UAL amount, I have our assumptions for our revenue projections. The first one up there is property tax. Traditionally, property tax grows at about 4% a year, 2% from Prop 13 and about 2% from houses that turn over in the market. Because housing prices are so incredibly high right now, we're seeing a higher percentage of growth. So we anticipate that to continue for a couple more years before it comes back down to traditional levels. So that's what's reflected up there for property tax. The sales tax, those first 2 years for the 2.3% and 2.9 are coming directly from HDL, our sales tax consultant, that's kind of tied in the sales tax data throughout the state. And then the 2.5 going after that is kind of our historical 10-year average, excluding COVID. I kind of won't include the COVID year there because it throws off all the averages. And then for the rest of them, TOT through the cannabis business tax are the same thing, just kind of our standard 10-year what we see over a 10-year history as far as growth projections going forward. The parking, you'll see a big increase this year. If you recall, we increased rates in January, so I'm showing that increase in the rates coming in this year. We also, through that rate increase, have the ability to increase by CPI each year. But rather than do, 5 to 10 cents each year, I kind of figured we'd go in 25-cent increments. I'm forecasting that next 25-cent increment would be around 2031. That could shift depending on what inflation does. And then finally, the revenue down there that's highlighted in yellow for new revenue for a hotel, that is a hotel that's kind of in the planning process right now. At this point, it's about a 50-50 if that comes to fruition. So we're showing the revenue on the 50% chance that it actually gets built and starts operating in 2027, but we're not counting that revenue at this point in the bottom lines down below on the 50% chance that it doesn't get built. So that's something that we're targeting or tracking, and then if that hotel gets built, we'll incorporate those numbers in, but that's probably still a couple years out before we know that. Below that, I'm going to actually go to the next slide if you don't mind. So that first side where that red box is, that's our net impact on fund balance, basically revenues less expenditures and what do we have left over. You can see, the other thing I need to point out, this does not include any increases in staffing costs since we're going through labor negotiations right now. This is forecast based on salaries and benefits as they stand today, which will change through labor negotiations. But just to give you a little bit of an idea, if you had say a 3.5% CPI rate over the term of the 10 years of this model, you'd see an increase in payroll costs of about $3 million. So without Measure F, it looks kind of scary when we start getting out there. As you're all well aware, on the 14th, we'll also be discussing the potential for a ballot measure and extending Measure F. So I've put those numbers down below that red box to kind of show that if we do get Measure F, how that changes the forecast going forward. And then before I move off those numbers, that is what we have after operations for roads, parks, programming, grants, staffing. That's everything that we have for ongoing expenditures in that red box right there. Next slide. I think this goes back to you.
All right. Well, one of my rules about PowerPoint slides is when you put something up on a slide, if you introduce it by saying, I'm sorry, I know you can't read that, you probably shouldn't have put it up in the first place, but I'm sorry, you can't read that. This is attachment 4 from the staff report, and we're trying a new format for this budget goal setting meeting, really trying to kind of go through each one of the projects that's been outlined kind of in prior years, current year, and try to hang a little bit of the estimated staff time associated with working on it, as well as with the costs are either in the general fund or in special revenue funds. So it's a screenshot of that attachment 4. And one of the things, next slide, please, is we tried to identify where each project came from. So each project in a code, whether it came from the city council, whether it came from state law, whether it's something that we've heard about from the community, or whether in some cases it's something that the department is proposing as a real need. Next slide. In addition, we also tried to identify staff requirements, basically how much effort does it take to do this, because not all projects are obviously created equal. So for very high projects, really what that's talking about is projects that involve coordination, multiple departments to work on it, as well as significant public process. When you get down to a project that has a low, it's probably a single staff person who can do it in a relatively succinct amount of time. But trying to help council and the community better understand sort of the amount of work involved in different types of projects. Next slide, please. This identifies identifies the total amount of general fund that's being proposed this year, next year. It's actually, I think, called not a proposal, it's a potential number. Really, it's up to council if you guys want to identify changes to that. And then in addition, you'll see the next slide. That this column here is the non-general fund bonus. So this would be funding restricted to roads, maybe restricted to the police department, maybe restricted to the arts, when it isn't coming from our general fund. And then the last point I call your attention to is we did put in gray some really important projects that council, the community, department think are really necessary and needed, but realistically, either for budget or staffing purposes, we're going to have to push into next year. And we really like council's feedback about that list, about whether or not some of them should be moved up to this year, and maybe some of the projects that we have this year could be pushed out into the future. So that's kind of the overall format we're trying. It's the first year we've tried it, so we'll be looking for feedback about how effective it is at communicating kind of the overall goals as we move along. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Public Works Director, who's going to go through the goals in the first in Public Works Department. And don't worry, the slide will get big.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. So not included on my slides of items is really our ongoing operations. It's obviously very capital improvements heavy when we're talking about budget, but just want to give a quick shout out to our crew and our ongoing operations in the Public Works Department. It really is things that are unseen. So I thought this picture well represented us being the stewards of our public infrastructure. Next slide, please. So one of the items that was inadvertently left off of this table in your packet was the wharf project, which will be going into next fiscal year. We still anticipate it being completed in the fall. This is our very high plus project. So it involves the entire Public Works Department, many in the finance and planning and city manager's department. It is really an all hands project that's going to continue to persist throughout this calendar year. Along with that, we have two other very high potential projects, one being the J Street Playground, Treasure Cove. It's a fundraising dependent. They're about 40% of the way to their fundraising goal as of the end of this January. And we are committed to doing the final design plans for that project when they get to 75% of their goal. So that has a very good potential of moving forward with final design plans this year, if not construction, if we're really lucky. The next very high project we have is the Community Center renovation project. Myself and Director Herlihy submitted a community development block grant for $3.2 million last week. We will not know back about that grant until July. And if we do get that grant, we are obligated to bid that project in October. So if one or both of these projects go through, there's a pretty high chance that some of the other projects that might be lower priority will need to come off for this fiscal year, but it's very dependent on whether this funding comes through or not. Other high potential projects for the Public Works Department for this coming year include the update to the Climate Action Plan. Reviewing the Climate Action Plan was a council goal for this fiscal year. Those results will be coming to council this spring. The Stockton Bridge Debris Project, which we received $500,000 sponsored by Senator Laird. There was also a prior council goal of $350,000 put towards this project. It's recommended that we hold on to those monies depending on the outcome of the initial study, which we intend on having sometime this fall. And then the last high project we have is our Cliff Drive Resiliency Project. We had our first public meeting on that project last week as well. That is on a tight timeline by FHWA. We need to have a bid-ready project by September of 2025, which is really, really fast. So that is a definitely high staff effort project. Slide, please. So on to our first slide of medium effort projects. These are all projects that are holdovers from prior fiscal years. So I'm sorry, they are not. That is inaccurate. So the 41st Avenue median improvements is currently unfunded in this version of the budget. The scope of what that would be is really dependent on what funding is allocated to it. We are currently studying the Peary Bridge and repairs that's needed. Emergency repairs were completed on that bridge, I want to say last fiscal year. We're currently evaluating the needs for its ongoing maintenance. There are FEMA projects that will continue on to next fiscal year, either due to their constructability or waiting on permits. Our upper pedestrian path from the parking lot over to the Monterey is RTC funded, but we are looking at ways in reducing that scope since the cost estimate came back very high. That should be coming back to council sometime later this year. The Bay Avenue corridor study is currently in process. That will continue on to next fiscal year. And then the Park at Rispin Mansion will be coming back to you all sometime in the next couple of council meetings. We are finalizing a contract with the contractor with a somewhat revised scope. Next slide. These other projects, I believe, are all new projects for this upcoming fiscal year. We received $1 million in funding from the RTC for construction, and not next fiscal year, but 25-26. However, these improvements on 41st include Caltrans right-of-way, which has quite a long lead time. So we're going to be applying for those permits within the next fiscal year. The next item is the Complete Streets Safety Assessments. This is a grant funded by the UC Berkeley Transportation Institute. There's no exchange of funds here. They come out and do the analysis and then provide the report that we are then able to use to support future projects and grant funding. Perry Park Bridge, we've already spoken about. Other items here are to support other departments, one being the lifeguard storage equipment. If you're unfamiliar with this lifeguard equipment storage, it is behind the pump station and restroom down in Esplanade Park. It consists of very dilapidated sheds from various sources and really isn't meeting the needs of our current program. The other improvement for separate departments is for the PD facility for their restrooms and locker rooms to make them more functional. The last medium effort project is daylighting, which is a state law that went into effect January 1st this year, requires the removal of parking within 20 feet of intersections or marked crosswalks. So that will be a significant endeavor for our department this fiscal year, continuing into next fiscal year. Next slide, please. Now we're to our lower potential projects for the Public Works Department in next fiscal year. One is pipeline repairs on Noble Gulch. You all funded a study for that. This fiscal year is completed. There are some minor repairs identified in that assessment that we have funding for from remaining allocation from this fiscal year. It's seasonally dependent. That's why it'd be pushed to next fiscal year. Park Avenue traffic calming, which will be coming to you all in the next few weeks or next few meetings to approve, and then we can bid and have it constructed next fiscal year. Our annual pavement maintenance project, and then pub track renovations, of which we have donated funds for. Our excluded projects for this fiscal year, again, very important, but either excluded due to funding challenges, which would be the bottom three, or just really staff time. We have a lot of very high staff requirement projects. And so these would are being recommended to be deferred to following fiscal years. And I know I went really fast, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right, any questions? We'll start at this end.
We talked earlier about the trees and specifically the eucalyptus trees. I didn't see that in this portion of it.
That's because that will be completed this fiscal
On top of that, not just for fire hazards, but recently with all our intense storms, we've had quite a few eucalyptus trees cause damage throughout the county. So we looked at that too, not just for fire, but also for liability reasons or
Yes, we have dead, dying, ones that are just illy placed. We have evaluated that with an arborist that is going to Planning Commission at their April meeting.
For the Esplanade Park improvements, the 50K was already allocated. So, but we haven't used it yet. Okay. And then could you touch a little bit more on the 41st Avenue median improvements? What type of improvements?
So the request we received was to address the medians below Capitola Road, so between Capitola Road and the southern city limit, to make them more aesthetically pleasing.
Okay.
I can speak to that more later.
Oh, okay.
That was
Cool.
one of my requests.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Is that it? Oh, okay. Any questions? Any questions?
A question. And I'm not sure if this would be more directed to you or to Jim, but I was just curious if the daylighting requirements are reflected in the projected budget because we're going to be losing paid parking, right? No.
Yeah, to answer your question, no, we did not ramp down the parking estimates for the village. So we have, I think it's, gosh, 100 parking spaces, I think, in the village, something like that. And each one generates $1,000, $5,000 a year. So those daylighting requirements, I think, would necessitate the removal of 14 spaces, if I remember correctly. So we haven't adjusted the budget at this point. We are hopeful that if you allocate the funding, we can look at some other alternatives, maybe talk to the BIA about some other alternatives to losing those spaces.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? No? Okay. Moving on. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight, I'll go over the numbers for community development. We provide services, issuing permits through planning and building, and then with the goals of providing economic vitality throughout the city through historic preservation and pr- protecting our unique history, culture, and natural setting. Next slide, please. So our projects for the next year, the first one is the Wharf Re-envisioning Plan, public outreach process, and temporary structures for our coastal development permits. This I have another slide on of what the actual process will look like and the timing, so I won't go into too much detail here, but with the recent, where the future demolition of the 2 buildings out there, really reaching out to the public, talking about the future uses on the wharf, and coming up with short-term and long-term projects for the future of the wharf. That's estimated at $75,000 and hiring a third party to help with that outreach. And it'll also be a internal lift by staff early on to get things moving prior to that contract. As you all know, we're working on the certification of our housing element. That's been ongoing, hoping that we could say that this will be completed before the next fiscal year, but it's not in our we don't make that determination. So working hard on that and in process. Also, one item that is staff driven is the update to the 41st Avenue Visioning Plan. This would require an staff time, but the idea behind this is to really start thinking about economic development along 41st Avenue to support our general fund in the future and creating more opportunities and supporting our businesses through land use practices. So that's one I'm suggesting that we move forward with. Also, the next 3 are from our housing element, and they're required by state law because of what we've agreed to within our housing element update. The first is to create a housing rehab grant or loan program. This I'd be working with our city attorney's office to actually create this loan program. And then we would have specific funding tied to this for each of those individual grants or loans. So the estimate is $30,000 of work done by our city attorney, and the rest of the money would go towards the residents for rehab projects. Code updates. This is for the housing element to update our code to reflect all the commitments we've made in the housing element. This is already underway. We've received money through our REAP 2.0 grant. Originally, it was about $120,000 that we received, and then the state let us know that we should only plan on receiving 50% of those funds. So we're actively working on the housing element or the code updates. And another item is to create a home buyers assistance program. This is also something we've identified in our housing element and committed to. And that would, again, be working with our city attorney and then to create the grant program or loan program and then implementation. So we do have money in our RDA successor agency fund that those 2 programs can come out of, as well as the REAP grant. So in terms of general plan funds, it would be the Wharf Re-envisioning and then the 41st Avenue. So in terms of the Wharf Re-envisioning Plan, this is just a quick timeline of what I expect. We would, if this was proposed to move forward, which I think it's a very high importance within our community, the first step is to publish a request for proposals. At the same time, from the staff level, we would put out a community survey to start discussing what items our community would like to see remain or be added on or removed from the wharf in the future. So what are the correct or what, just to figure out what is that menu that people want to discuss of future uses on the wharf. Following that, this summer, once we have all those ideas, then we'd have a community meeting to kind of present all the ideas that we received and then get more feedback from the community on how they feel about each of these ideas. What are the benefits and challenges with each idea? And then following a community meeting, putting all of that information into the public outreach results, which we'd bring to city council within a presentation and ask for direction. Following that, for any temporary use out on the wharf or permanent use on the wharf, coastal development permits are required, and depending on the type of use, it also might require a planning permit. So we would bring that forward, whatever the outcome is, bring that forward to Planning Commission for those permits and then activate the temporary use. I put fall, winter for this category, not knowing if what we're talking about and how big it would be and how much time it would take. But my hope would be that once the wharf is completed, we would have permits so that we can move forward with the next thing. So really not losing time and keeping the momentum going. And then also out of this, the recommendation on a long-term use for the wharf would be not going as quickly as the short term, knowing that the short-term need will be great. So that will go out through the winter. So with that, next slide, please. Other projects that at this time, they're excluded based on future consideration by City Council. The second phase of our City Hall project, the cost we received for that was $67,000. We plan on providing an update to you this spring on the findings of our current study. Next, something that has been on our list for a long time and we haven't been able to get around to is the updated tree ordinance. We estimate this at $30,000. It's quite a great section of our code that's very long and cumbersome and needs some attention, but it would take a lot of staff time to complete that. And then another item is historic guidelines for our historic districts and development within our historic districts. It'd be great to have some guidelines so that when applicants come in, they know exactly what is expected of their application when you're in a historic district. That would be staff intense and I estimate about $75,000 for that project. So thank you. That concludes my part of the presentation and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions on this end?
I was curious with the, let's see, the housing rehab grant loan program. How is it going to be determined whether they're grants or loans, or is that something that's already been determined with the process?
Yeah, so first it will depend. We'll have to look at the funding source and what I'm allowed to do within those dollars. And then, so I'll be working closely with the city attorney. But then it is good you can typically do a loan program and that it's a silent second. An individual wouldn't have to pay anything on this grant or on that loan until they sell the home. For the updates, there's usually a low interest rate tied to those. So that would be my preference, so that the money comes back into our community, would be to do a loan. But depending on, I'd have to really go through exactly what you can do with that funding source and make sure we could set up loans.
Great, thank you. And I'm also curious, and maybe this is too open-ended of a question, but what types of structures might be considered for the temporary on the wharf?
Sure. Well, I've heard quite a few ideas, as I'm sure you have in the recent weeks. I think temporary structures could be anything from just simple trailers to roll out boats for fishing and some type of temporary structure, either that's mobile or a small, like shed or something in which bait and snacks could be sold from, or to keep the fishing portion of that running. Other ideas that I've heard is creating a temporary venue for live music out there, for like a stage, food vendors such as within food trucks. So those are just a few of the ideas.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the presentation. On the slide with the timeline for the war, that one, just for some clarity, I see that there's community survey on a temporary use of wharf, community meeting on, is that to be assumed temporary uses of wharf? Is that what the community meeting is going to be about?
So I think by summer, I would definitely have a third party that would be helping and collaborating. So I think at that point, we would be talking about long-term. And I should say within that survey, it would be a community survey, exactly what's in there. I'll probably have some questions about short-term versus long-term. So I think that this whole package is kind of a short-term and long-term, looking at it together, but knowing that the deliverables of permits for the short-term will happen a lot earlier than that final recommendation on long-term.
Have you thought about splitting maybe kind of these two timelines apart? Just because if I'm looking at it, the community survey for temporary use of wharf, then the community meeting, and then I look at the very end recommendation on long-term use of wharf. I just think those are two clearly different conversations for the community that could get really, it could get confusing, right? And so have you, is there a reason behind consolidating? Is it because of the third party coming in? Or is it like a separate, do we need the third parties to have two different conversations with the community? Therefore, we need more funding. Are we trying to put it all together in one? Just trying to wrap my mind around this.
I was thinking it would be a cost savings to wrap this into one study, so that we could, but just being really clear in our questions and in our public engagement process of that we're looking for short-term and long-term solutions. So I definitely hear you that this could
Yeah.
get confusing, and I think we'd have to, if the council directed us to split this out into two activities that are separated, we could definitely do that. But
I can bring that up later in comments. Do you have an idea of how, if a cost that would range to have facilitation with the consultant to facilitate two?
so I think if we split it out to two, it would become definitely more expensive, because you're asking them to come back a second time to have these community meetings. And I was thinking they'd be really interactive in terms of having a lot of information set up and having interactive discussions around tables and, maps and stickers and fun stuff like that. So I think
Yeah,
it would
I see
be,
that
I
with the
could see
long-
the,
Yeah.
I could see a little bit of savings for the short term to do that first. And then the long term, what I was thinking was wrapped into this for the long-term recommendation is like recommendations to the point of like possible, if we're going to be creating buildings or anything like that, just
Yeah.
possibly to the step of simple rendering.
Okay, I'll bring that back to council during comment. And those are all my questions. Thank you.
It's great to see a plan all laid out. I think it's going to do us a lot of good. But I was wondering if the staff or the council has thought of bringing back the wharf working group while we're going through all of this. Something that you might want to visit again, take a look at.
So the Wharf Working Group, my memory, it's been a while since I've taken a look at it. My recollection was it was comprised of the Public Works Director and then maybe one or two council members, and then the business owners, I think.
There are a few community members on it.
I don't believe so.
confirm
I
you.
thought it was
There were no community members. It was the two business owners, two council members, the city manager, and the public works director that was the group.
Yeah, I was just thinking as we're moving forward, and it'd be a good steering group to just stay on top of things. As these plans, they look great, but stay on them and need to move forward.
All right. Further questions? Thank you. And next we have city manager.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mayor, and Council. I'm going to start this off at least. And I just wanted to say, the City Manager Department does kind of a variety of things that you see every meeting here with staff at the table and our city clerk. And it's very much about enhancing community engagement, transparency, but also something I'm personally really proud of is we also are in charge of taking care of our own, for lack of a better way of putting it. Our human resources division is within this department. And we have a lot of our own employees here tonight. So thank you for being here. So moving into some of the projects that we're either currently working on or have identified as potentially pretty significant for the community and for yourselves. One that you're familiar with that we are in process, our 5-year strategic plan project. That is a pretty high effort on the staff level, involves all city departments, and then a lot of public outreach. What I'll say is that we have kicked off this project. The city manager and myself have been in several meetings already discussing this exciting project. However, no public process has started. We're anticipating that would be sometime in April. So no outreach as of yet. Something that I'm projecting, will wrap up this fiscal year is our contract negotiations with our fabulous employees. It is a pretty high effort. Cost is unknown. Now, some of these other projects are things that our department has come up with as a great idea, like having more digital applications for the public to use, some community-driven projects such as our coordination and our collaboration with Santa Cruz County Park Friends and raising money for our fabulous UA playground. That could turn into more of a medium level project dependent on the fundraising, as our public work director mentioned earlier. Looking into more higher risk management, more of our safety program, and updating some of our HR policies to protect our employees and the city. And then currently, this may turn into larger work as we get our results from the revenue tax measure, the voter polling. We're going to hear from them next week. And then dependent on where council decides to go, we may be doing more outreach around that topic. And then only a few more, I promise. The update to our employee down payment assistance program that was identified, I believe, in this current fiscal year goal. Like our city manager mentioned, the money was set aside, so it was kind of marked as complete. But updating the actual program, modernizing it so that our employees can really get use out of it is something that staff is looking into, including a little bit more employee engagement, outreach to the public, as we have a pretty big deal. Our general election is coming up. As you know, yesterday was Super Tuesday, so we're in presidential election year, and our new clerk is really passionate about bringing engagement to the community, which is fabulous. And then translation services, which goes along with more transparency, more engagement, and then some state-driven mandates for website updates and other tech updates. So I believe, so this slide, as before me, it's okay. Thank you. Sorry. Potentially excluded projects based on bandwidth and funding are listed here. So you may have noticed there's been a higher ask of more hybrid meetings and more workshops that are virtual and in person. And some of our technology is slightly out of date. So it could be a really big, exciting project, but also costly to make the technology better to improve those meetings. But we do think that's important. So we wanted to lay that out here as potential. That goes along with increasing our public outreach. And another large project, which we got great news today, actually, LAFCO did vote and agree to participate in funding an annexation study. So they're contributing another $15,000 to this. However, the reach of staff and the effort puts this in something to potentially push off till next fiscal year. And then our memorial plaque program, updating that, figuring out a way that the community still feels that they have an option to memorialize loved ones, but also that really works well for staff and for our public works team is something we can look at, but does involve multiple departments. So I believe that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer questions or clarify anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? No? Questions?
Question. Um, I'm curious about the digital applications, if
Mhm.
that is going to digitize like all of the applications or which ones might be included and what might not be included in that effort.
So I'm going to have our city clerk respond because this is something she's spearheading.
So currently, the city has a variety of applications. The format varies. We have applications dating from all different time periods, and they're all available in paper format for people to have in office. And some of them are available as fillable PDFs online, but not all. Our website has about 3 different web pages of forms available to members of the public to view. It would be great if all of our applications were available to fill out digitally and something that members of the public could fill out online and submit directly rather than downloading a PDF, turning it or converting it into a fillable PDF, and then having to email that back to staff. So creating a uniform product that is consistent, easy to use, and really user-friendly for members of the public of all ages. And those applications would also be available in paper format for our members of the public who would prefer to receive them in paper or in person, but there would be a really uniform product online. We currently have resources available to us to start the process, but part of it would involve for our staff members who are out in the field, for example, some technology upgrades to them like iPads while they're reviewing building permits or taking plan checks, that they would have those resources available to them to review things digitally, provide notes to people digitally. It would really provide an updated and technology friendly and accessible way to kind of have those notes and track things as they provide the information. So it would increase efficiency in the long run, and it's something that staff is recommending moving forward.
It's very exciting. And has there been any discussions about creating bilingual options during this digitization process?
So that does play into, we have translation services listed here. We do have certain staff members who are certified bilingual speakers. They do have to pass like an examination process to become certified bilingual speakers, but there is a difference between speaking another language and then writing a form in another language. And so by hiring translation services, the city would be able to ensure that our forms are being translated in the best way and most equitable way possible for the languages that we would select. So that is another thing that staff is recommending moving forward with.
So those two items would tie together.
Yes.
And I have one more question about increased public outreach and information services. And I'm just curious, like, what exactly does that mean?
So that could be a variety of things, but what we've really identified in the city manager department is we've seen such an increase in engagement on our social media platforms, which is incredible, but it's actually pretty time consuming for staff. And so there's different applications that you can purchase and memberships for graphic design, and also allowing for like better branding across the board and allowing us to schedule out and plan ahead so that there's regular content available. We can check it ahead of time, but not be literally day to day working on that. So it's running kind of more in the background. But that's just one example.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to recreation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I think we're almost at evening. So I'm excited to present on the Recreation Division as well as the Art and Cultural Commission. Council may remember that a few meetings ago, Recreation staff was here to present on all of the activities and programs that we provide to the community, from adult and youth programming to the community events that we help organize. For the upcoming goals, an idea that we had kind of birthed coming out of the pandemic as a result of a lot of delayed weddings, and other Parks and Rec divisions or departments in the area have done similar programs, as to we're going to try and pilot a rapid wedding event as a exciting opportunity within our city. We would like to continue the work that we have for our Equity Swim program, and then build upon that for Public Safety Outreach program. is currently in operation, and hopefully we'll be able to identify funding, additional funding in partnership with the school district for this one. In an upcoming meeting, council will hear more about a park use permit ordinance. And so within this upcoming budget to roll out that permit program. And then Recreation would like to purchase a portable stage for events that would enable bands or other performance type events to be in areas where there are not stages currently. In the grayed out areas on this slide, you'll see that we have lifeguard equipment, which would be to purchase a PWC. And then additionally, in this grayed out section is pickleball courts. I'll note that this was not in the packet. We have had community interest in having pickleball as an option within the city. This is a very polar idea, and to really get to get a temperature of pickleball courts within the city, there is a large amount of community engagement that would need to happen in order to identify the best way for the city to go about implementing this. This would be a project that we would co with the Public Works Department. And so that community engagement process would really need to identify what would that be. And the range of opportunities for pickleball within the city could be as simple as co-striping, but as large as the development of a complete facility. And so this is a very high staff need in order to implement this kind of project, and therefore in the gray. If you'll move on to the next one, please. Thank you. All right, so for art and cultural, as part of the bylaws for the Art and Cultural Commission is to identify public art projects that are already installed in the city, but could use some maintenance. And so the Art Commission identified the 41st Avenue median art as well as the utility box murals as their goals for maintenance of the public art. They've also had a project kind of working on for a while regarding adding banners to the village streetlights. So there's like streetlights that have little arms on them to do banners that would be a beautification art project within the city. And then an upcoming project that will actually be completed within this budget cycle that the commission will receive a proposal on next week is a partnership between the school district and the city for a Park Avenue and Washburn student art project where the students would be creating tiles with ELOP funds and the city would be contributing in that effort. The Art and Cultural Commission also identified regarding their programs to have no change for our current programs for the upcoming summer, and then to continue on with the public art projects that they are currently working on, which is a Begonia commemorative art project, as well as for Monterey railing art projects. And so with that, I am available for questions regarding my portions of the presentation.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The banners, I was just curious if the Art and Cultural Commission, if they would be able to use funds that they have.
Yeah, so in the original reading of the code, it was believed that it should be a general fund allocation. However, we reached out to the city attorney and had a broader conversation about it. And it does seem like this project could actually be funded through the Public Art Fund.
Okay. Great. And then Oh, the stage. I like the idea. I'm just curious, if we've thought, would the wharf be included in that? A spot that it could be used?
Yeah, having a portable stage would definitely provide an opportunity for us to use that out on the wharf or out in Monterey Park. It would be available for many spaces within the city where we needed a stage.
And then one more, on the pickleball, um, have there been any locations, other than the double striping, which you would just use a tennis court or something, right?
Well, yeah, so the double striping and
Whatever you called it.
I am not the expert on this, but the double striping would use the tennis courts, would use our current tennis courts, and it could be as simple as like laying down additional striping so that they're co-striped for tennis and pickleball. We could resurface, we could develop, like there's a whole range of opportunities and community engagement would be very important for us to identify what would be the right fit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You remind me when Monterey Park is going to be remodeled? Is that?
So that project, if you recall, we got a presentation from the school district a couple of meetings ago. It involves a land swap between the school district and the city. We still don't have sort of the draft of the agreement yet. So I think that that's kind of the next step. We do have a plan to take it to our planning commission, I think coming up in April, for them to make the findings being consistent with the general plan. But that's the next step, is to kind of approve the purchase and sale agreement where we swap the property. And then at that point, then the school district would be sort of free to commence with their construction.
And then from what I recall, as we get a parcel, we have a little bit of space that is technically the city's. Nikki, do you have any thoughts, or has the department had any ideas around a potential portable for that space for Monterey Park to support the aftercare program? I noticed there's a big range for the pickleball court, and I'm just wondering if that's something you all have explored.
Yeah, it's definitely an idea that we have explored. It is an attractive idea to have a really solid home for our after school programs and to kind of build out some of like the kitchen needs that might be important for those programs. But in conversation with the school district as well, there might be other opportunities there. Nothing has been decided, but definitely having those conversations as opportunities.
Okay, so you don't see a need for the 24-25 budget cycle for council to have a further conversation about potential portable for that site at this time?
Without knowing the project timeline, I don't think I could truly answer that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was curious about the pickleball as well, and specifically the sites. Has there been any other locations besides the discussion of Jade Street that have been looked at or discussed?
Again, I am not the public works director, but I think that because this would very much be a co-project in identifying those kind of sites, I do think that there is probably opportunity to try and develop a facility, but it is a very high staff yield project, and the community engagement would be really necessary to identify impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods. If it were next to the tennis courts. So without doing a lot of the pre-work, I don't think I could comfortably say like this would be a good site or not.
Got it. And then that kind of leads to my next question. The range quoted here, $1,000 to $500,000. Is that encompassing the initial public outreach study and construction, or what does that refer to?
So that range, and if you want more answers, we'll have to defer to the public works director, but that range is really just to kind of capture the broad options that implementing a pickleball court could be. So the lowest end is just for us to go out there and paint stripes over our tennis court. And then that upper end is to like develop a full facility. But without having a direction as to where the community would really like for that to go, it's hard to know what kind of budget we would actually want to put before council in order to identify that.
Sure. So the $500,000 encompasses possible construction. So do we have any estimate on how much it would cost just to get this initiative started with a study?
Thinking about this, I'm not sure necessarily that this is a task where a study or a consultant would really be that productive. I think the trick would be to look at an inventory of land, host some community meetings, bring those recommendations to council. I don't think that there's much technical component to something like this. It's really kind of about where is a good spot in our community? Where's a neighborhood that's interested in hosting something like this?
Need a lot of interaction.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's often what drives a lot of the staff time associated with these kinds of projects. It's not so much the physical aspect of like just putting lines down on an existing court, or it is, the act of building it. It's the process around it. And these sorts of things, I think we've seen recently with the dog park, for example, and historically the same kind of issue with skate parks. They're challenging to cite sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Here this evening to provide an overview of our budget projections for this next coming year. Next slide. We don't have too much on the table here, but what we're looking at is the flock camera, which I'm going to try and bring that before council here in the next month or so. But that's something that we were anticipating. We're also working on the high surf threshold. That was something that the council directed us from these last storms. So we're working on that. And then I did notice the electronic online police reporting. That's actually 10,000, and the e-citations is 25. So those just need to be reversed. But the online police reporting is a project that would allow folks to essentially fill out a police report. Like if they had something that happened overnight, they could go to work and they could fill it out online and file a police report, not actually have to come into the police department. Then a sergeant would approve it. And then the e-citations is for our traffic citations. So it would allow the officers to print out the tickets, and it's all done electronically. So it eliminates a lot of the confusion when we send tickets to the courts and they have to send it back for corrections, and it makes that process a lot more fluid. And so those are the 4 projects that we have planned for this next coming year. Next slide. That's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Short and sweet.
Thank you.
All of the funding is actually that comes from the supplemental law enforcement fund that we get each year. So
wonderful.
That's the funding that we're looking at.
So none of this is general fund.
None of this.
Great. Questions?
Yeah, questions about that high surf and our response. And I really like the idea of how you put out the marquee or the electric sign for high surf flooding. But I just hope we can continue this and do it a year review, annual review on our more stronger storms, climate change, and on and on and on.
Yeah, I have a meeting with Brian from NOAA next week, and we're going to basically analyze the last 2 storms, and then we're going to look at them and then kind of come up with some kind of triggers, if you will. So we look at forecasts, and then we can, what's the biggest impact to our specifically Capitola, and so we're looking at that. So that'll be coming in the near future, along with I'm trying to update the emergency operation plan. So that'll be a piece.
That electric board, is that actually used for traffic mostly, or?
Yeah, and it's a traffic. It's actually a speed sign as well, so we can do like surveys and radar with it as well. But we use it for the notifications, and then we have it now up on for Capitola Avenue. So it's a city sign, so we can move that. It's just a public notification.
I also saw that it was in Spanish too, which was great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's something.
This isn't really related to anything on the slide, but a question about the parking, the pay stations. There's been quite a few that have not been operating, and so I didn't know if there was an update on that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we have 31 pay stations in the city. Currently there are 4 that are down. We do sustain a lot of damage from the storms. They're all electronic where the elements are really, really difficult. So the good news is that 3 of the 4, we've had to actually order special parts and have a technician that's actually coming in from Los Angeles this next week. And so 3 of the 4 should be up and running within this next week to next week. The one that's right on the Esplanade, like right at the Esplanade Loop there, that actually that was a brand new machine, and this last wave event absolutely drenched it. And so we have 4 new machines that are ordered. So I think this last year we replaced 6 and we've ordered 4 more. So we're just trying to slowly but surely get the machines up and running. So by next week, we should only have 1 machine down. Like I said, we've ordered 4. They're just have to be delivered and then put in.
And so then every time we would have to get a technician out, or do any of the parking enforcement folks know how to troubleshoot?
So the parking enforcement, they do a lot of the maintenance, and then we also, our city mechanic helps with it. But if it goes outside our scope, or if something like we had the motherboards if there's any moisture that gets in there, they just fry, and it's really, really difficult. I will add though too that we do have Park Mobile, which is a mobile app that people can use. And so as we kind of transition away from money and credit cards, that's another option. So people can use that app, and then also they can use the different pay stations. New is that we are covering them, so people have that visual that don't go, because they'll go to the machine and see that a couple of them are down. And so we have a map, and then we direct them to where the machines that are working.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it says there's opportunity for potential grant funding for the response checklist. Is that to assume that if we don't get the grant funding, we don't get a response checklist?
No, I think that's just to look for any grant funding that could help with any type of future forecasting stuff. But this will all be done with just staff work. I think between myself and the NOAA representative, the city manager, we could probably come up with enough to at least get us started on what it looks like.
Is that partially why there's, like for the climate action plan, it's so much money? I might have missed that part. Is there some connection there with the checklist and the plan? No?
No, the climate action plan is definitely a separate project that was supposed to be funded from the Green Building Fund.
It is from the Green
Yeah.
Building Fund. Okay. And then I noticed that their gun buyback program isn't on the list. Is that just because it's going to happen, or do we?
We've already done that. So that was it. It's not funded for this next year, but we put the $5,000 and we did the gun buyback with the sheriff's office.
Do I need to say if we need it for 24, 25 today?
I would actually say, because the turnout wasn't as great as we expected. And so I know that the 5 agencies put in some money, and then we have the Chiefs Association matched it, and we had some leftover money to do another buyback this next year. So I don't know that we have adequate funding, I guess, to continue that forward, and I'm happy to bring that forward.
Okay. So maybe just as a prior or a council goal versus actually allocating dollars. That sounds good.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just had a quick question, follow up with the pay stands, just to make sure I understand correctly. The Park Mobile is in addition to the pay stand. So if the pay stand is down, you can still do Park Mobile in the same parking spot. Okay, thank you.
I will add that I think it was 31 pay stations we have. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of pay station in the city. And I have had a dream that at some point we can eventually transition into an all app payment system. You know, there's certainly different types of services, like if you need a ride with Lyft or with Uber, you know, you're going to have to use the app. We're not there yet. And I keep hoping that we're at the last round of purchases for these pay stations, and we'll be able to eventually transition into, you know, just having 2 or 3 of them around. But I think in the long term, that's probably in the city's best interest, and kind of continue to push the app, because these are expensive to maintain, and they're in a, you know, high impact zone for sure. And they will cost money every couple of years.
Yeah, I'm curious why we are going with the pay stations. Does it increase the amount of money, or is it an equity issue, or what's the logic behind it?
I think it's an equity issue. You know, it's just that not everybody is comfortable using the app.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No? All right, thank you. And moving on to the finance department. Bring on the spreadsheets.
For the exciting stuff. So I'll just give a quick overview of the finance department. Similar to police, we're more of an operating department. We don't take on a lot of projects, so most of our stuff is just kind of our daily, weekly, monthly stuff that we do. We do have a couple of projects we're working on. Currently, we're working on an update to the TOT ordinance, partly in response to the beach house audit that we had. That's actually with legal review right now, so that one's hopefully will be back in front of council this spring. We're getting ready to issue an RFP for banking services. We've been with the same bank for about 10 years, so it's time to go look and see what else is out there, if there is anything else, and what kind of technology changes we might be able to get. Because we, along with the online forms, we want to transition more to online payments. We get a lot of requests for that, and we're just not quite there yet. And then also we are about halfway through our fee study, which that should also be coming to council, I hope, in April, or any changes to the fee study to be ready by July 1st. That was funded last year, but just something that we're working on and hope to wrap up. The other thing I didn't list up there, I guess I did, it's kind of buried in our daily stuff, is we're also in the process of we're changing auditors, whether we stay with the same firm or not. We need to change our audit team. We've been with the same one for 6 years. We just got proposals last week. So first year audits are a little more challenging than the following years. So it's something else that we'll be working on, is bringing in a new auditor for this next fiscal year. And that is it for finance, unless you have any questions.
Any questions? No? All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Are there more slides? Oh, there we go.
Thank you. So these are the totals. You'll recall at the beginning of the meeting, we went over the available fund balance. It was about $200,000. The proposed potential projects, I don't even want to call them proposed at this point, but the potential project list, the total there was $222,000, with another $2 million out of non-general fund sources. So you can see the totals by department. The largest expenditures that are proposed in Public Works was the PD locker room renovation, and then the largest expenditure in community development was the $75K for the wharf outreach planning process. Next slide, please. So the recommended action tonight is to look at the principles, provide any updates, feedback, direction on that, and then take a look at the ideas that we had around next year's goals, priorities. If there's any changes to this year's budget you'd like to make, and then the next steps is that we will plan to publish the agenda on May 3rd. And our first budget hearing is May 16th, which looks really late to me. Okay, well. And we're publishing on May 3rd still.
Usually.
Yeah. That actually really throws you off.
Okay. So we do usually publish a week ahead of time. So I think the correct date for the draft publication would be May 10th. Is that right?
The draft is we
Okay.
have a little bit more lead time in between normally with draft.
Yeah. Good. Well, that gives everyone a little bit more time to digest it before we go into hearing. So
It's gonna be okay.
it'll be okay.
I changed that date.
Threw me off.
Jeez.
All right. And with that, I'm available for questions. Also happy to help facilitate if the council wants us to take notes and share them up on the screen, kind of whatever process the mayor would like to follow.
All right, I'm gonna start with seeing if there are any general questions that haven't been asked already. I have a couple, and then I'll take it to public comment, and then I'll bring it back for discussion. So just questions right now. Any questions that haven't been asked? No? Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, yeah.
I did not see Nikki scholarships up there for our programs. And again, is this for the next year? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, thank you. So the council may remember that in the last budget cycle, a large dollar amount, and maybe Jim remembers the number, I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, it was from the ECYP funds, were allocated into recreation for youth in general. So we have been drawing from those funds, but that fund is still very robust, particularly because the school district also granted us a very large gift from their ESSER funds, and that was $30,000. So the majority of the after-school scholarship needs were covered by the school district grant. And so the remaining scholarship fund for all of youth within recreation still is kind of rolling over, and it's still very robust. I do not know the number off the top of my head, but it hasn't dropped more than $5,000 from when it was allocated. We do have summer registration coming up. We'll do junior guard registration on the 12th, and then camp registration on the 19th. We'll definitely see some draw from that, but I feel that fund will continue to be healthy. And we have had conversations with the school district about potential gifts for next school year for the after-school program as well. They need to go to their board.
So just for clarification, the after-school program and the summer programs both have scholarship opportunities. The school district dollars that we have, are those restricted by financial need? So do they have to be like on low, like free and reduced lunch or part of?
Yeah, so when any youth does an application for recreation, that application is actually reviewed by a nonprofit partner. And the application does include criteria such as free and reduced lunch, but it also takes other information about the financial picture of the family. The nonprofit that we work with reviews that, and then they report back a percentage of allocation for whatever they've requested. So if they've requested a semester of after school, they would report back saying that they have are benefited a 75% allocation, and then we do that award.
And I guess I can ask this later, like offline, but where I'm going with this is that there's just a lot of families in need that aren't considered low income. We have a lot of middle income families here that don't qualify for support, and I'm worried that they're not getting any of these scholarships, and therefore our money that we've assigned for scholarships are just sitting there. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could work closer with that nonprofit to ensure that we're not saying no to families that are taking the time to submit applications. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that or need any thing that we need to say on council to designate this as a goal or something I should bring up this evening.
Yeah, I can definitely just look further into what the actual numbers that are coming back in relationship to what that middle income scholarship award might be. I can assure council that a big part of the reason why we work with a nonprofit in order to award those funds is in order to capture exactly that concern, that we are looking at the financial picture of a family in regards to their request needs. So we definitely do award 25% scholarships that is reported back from that nonprofit as to that's what that family has been awarded based on their financial picture of need. But I'm happy to go back and do some further investigation in that because it is something that I actually care very deeply about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't want our money sitting there when we know there's definitely families who need it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I just have a couple. The climate action plan update from the Green Building Fund, where's the 50,000 number come from? Is that just an estimate or it's an estimate? Okay, so if it turns out that the update doesn't cost that much, the money will just return to general fund?
The Green Building Fund.
The Green Building Fund, excuse me. Yes. Okay. Okay, great. We received an email about ensuring that our housing element update become a priority in our goal setting. And there was which of course it is. And there was indication in that email that we received that we could be eligible for some REAP 2.0 funding, but my understanding is we've already received REAP 2.0 funding. So can you talk a little bit about that and what that would be used for in terms of our housing element?
Yes, we received REAP 2.0 funding. It was about, a little over $120,000. Then we were informed by AMBAG that about half that money is going away. So what we said we were going to use our REAP 2.0 was to provide, to like implement our zoning code, our code to allow for housing opportunities along 41st Avenue. So this money right now is going towards the zoning code updates that we've already started working on. So I think part of that email was also inquiring, like within our housing element, we have about 80 items that we are saying that we're going to deliver on. And you're not seeing 80 items listed out for you tonight because I've gone through and I've grouped these into sections. And for an example, the zoning code alone has probably 30 edits that need to happen that are tied to the housing element. And that's just under that one line item, utilizing the REAP money. Another example is like the housing rehab is another item, but many of these are a lot of public outreach items about community building, having community meetings. Those I'm not going to put single line items to. We're going to collaborate with local nonprofits, have more events to check those boxes off, and it won't be a cost to the taxpayer. So,
thank you. And then I just have one more question before I open it for public comment. So we're talking a lot about, I guess you'd say, kind of a small strategic plan for the wharf, kind of short-term and longer-term plan. And then we're also talking about a bigger strategic planning process for the city as a whole. And I feel like because the wharf is such an important part of our city right now, that it's going to be duplicated within those two processes. And so because the wharf interim buildings to temporary uses is kind of priority, I'm wondering if there's a consideration of doing that first and then starting our strategic plan, because my concern is that if we have our strategic planning process and our wharf planning process at the same time, that we're going to end up potentially ending up with some conflicting documents, one from council, one from community. And I'm wondering if it would make sense to have our wharf project done so that when we move into the strategic planning process, we already know what's going to happen there and can focus on other longer term issues. Has there been discussion of that at all at staff level?
We have talked about that at a staff level. Obviously the goal of the strategic plan is to focus 5 to 10 years out. And the wharf is so important to so many people right now. It is, I think it's on people's mind. And so the question is, when is it strategic to ask strategic questions? And it may be that we need to sort of get through the wharf strategic plan, figure out what that vision looks like. And then maybe people have a little bit more bandwidth to kind of focus on sort of bigger picture long term.
If it was moved, so public process right now for the strategic planning is expected in spring. If it was moved to fall, we're not losing the money for it. It's not going anywhere. It's still going to be a funded project. It'll still happen in this fiscal year. It'll just, the public process will start in the fall rather than in the spring.
That is an option. It's an option.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, I'm curious if the citywide strategic planning was put off and we do the wharf strategic plan first, would that encompass the long-term wharf plan or just the short-term? Has there been any thought about that?
I don't think I've thought at that granular level in terms of the timing. I think number one is kicking off that process and having a transparent process for the wharf, I think. And then number two is finding a way to get the temporary uses up in the fall. I think at that point, then I think maybe there's a little bit more breathing room in everything. So I'm like, okay, where are we going as a city?
The slide that was with the community development slides indicated that the longer term wharf discussions would be around the winter. Is that correct? That one with the red blocks. Can you show me that slide again?
So
Yeah, this right here. So the recommendation on long-term use of Capitola Wharf, I guess what I'm looking at, and I'll bring this back during discussion. Right now, I was just questioning if this is something that had been considered. What I was looking at is that most of this is about temporary use, temporary permits. And then there was a community meeting about kind of longer term, which I think if that happens in the summer and we move strategic planning to the fall, then that actually works out really well because then we would have had a community meeting on longer term plans for the wharf. We start our strategic planning process in the fall and include the outcome of that community meeting. And then recommendation on long-term use of Capitola Wharf begins in the winter when the strategic planning process is continuing. Am I thinking about this in a way that makes sense? Or, I mean, I'm not asking for like,
Yeah.
yes, this is good or bad, but I mean, is any of what I'm saying not adding up in terms of timelines
I
and?
think the only change is that it would cost more and it would take longer. So if we were to do the temporary first and not start asking questions about the long term.
No, I'm not
gonna-
suggesting that.
Oh,
Yeah. No, I'm not suggesting, I'm looking right here where it says the community meeting you said would be in summer, right? That would be on about a longer term vision of the wharf. Yeah, so I'm still suggesting that go forward, but I think that that would be beneficial to have the community meeting about the long-term plans for the wharf already done so that come fall, when we start larger strategic planning for the whole city, that meeting's already informing the conversations about the wharf rather than having that go on at the same time. Sorry, I feel like am I talking in
makes sense.
circles?
that makes sense.
Okay, all right. I'll leave it at that. We'll come back to it. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're gonna open it up to public comment. This is a time for members of the public to address the council on this item specifically. Okay, seeing none, we will close it and bring it back to council. I will open it up to council discussion. Before we do, I just do want to address, because it was asked earlier about the Esplanade Park and the medians. Last time we did a goal setting process, I had asked for $50,000 to go towards Esplanade Park because that does not look like it is a goal that we are going to reach in the next fiscal year. I am planning to ask that money, 25,000 of it go towards the wharf and 25,000 of it go towards the improvement of some of the medians on 41st Avenue, because I received some outreach from some business owners that were concerned about the condition of some of the medians. So I'll just leave it at that and we will start discussion. Start on this end.
I think it is a good idea to take care of the wharf first and then move for a strategic plan after we get later into the winter. It does make sense. Would make sense to do them both at the same time and duplicate all that work. I was glad to hear that. I was trying to think of a way to come up and talk about that. That's probably the way to go. And also, I still really think that wharf working group, something we need with stakeholders and city council members, staff.
Staff time or cost associated with bringing back the wharf working group?
I think there'd be a staff time cost, but not a fiscal cost. Assuming we stuck with the same composition. It's a little bit different in this situation because we're not going to have leaseholders when the buildings are gone. So maybe some guidance from the council a little bit about kind of, is it an ad hoc committee of the council that's meeting with staff? Is it that exact same group as it was before? Feedback along those lines would be helpful.
I think an ad hoc committee would be good. And we can probably identify as we move forward, people that are potentially going to be stakeholders. You can always add them. And
Sorry. Gathering my thoughts. So I'd like to support your idea of allocating the 25 and 25 to the other projects aside from the Esplanade Park improvements. And along the lines of Public Works, I'd like us to potentially look into the daylighting alternatives for the parking. And then while we're on the topic of sort of that portable bandstand, I just want to make sure, and I think this was reiterated last meeting when we were heavily talking about the wharf. But just that either a space for that bandstand, hookups for that bandstand, temporary food truck things, like I just want to make sure we are ready to do that because I want the public to know that we're serious about continuing action out on the wharf. Obviously it's outside. So I just want that to be a priority within moving forward on the rebuild. And then, yeah, I think what we're talking about, and maybe clarify, is sort of separating the short-term and long-term goals associated with the wharf, right?
No, my suggestion wasn't to separate the short-term and long-term goals of the wharf. It's to separate the wharf planning process generally from the strategic planning process, or at least push the strategic planning process to the fall because it's supposed to start in April. But we're starting a kind of, I guess you'd say, its own strategic planning process on the wharf. And I feel like we're going to be duplicating efforts because people are going to be very involved with the wharf, and that will become a priority of the strategic plan for the city. But we will be doing our own strategic plan on the wharf. And I feel like that's duplicating staff time, that's duplicating cost. I feel like it's going to be hard when we're doing a strategic plan for the city and people are saying, I want to focus on the wharf, to continually tell people, oh, actually, we're already doing a plan for the wharf, but we can do one here too. But I feel like it just becomes kind of complicated.
Okay.
So I do think that the short-term and long-term wharf discussions as presented by staff should continue to move forward that way. But the way that the timeline lines up would mean that by the time we start our strategic planning for the city, there will have already been community meetings about the long-term vision for the wharf. And so then we can just carry that over into the strategic plan, knowing that the short term has pretty much already been determined.
Okay. That sounds good. I don't know why it was so
It's
muddied
not-
in my
that's
brain.
complicated.
And then, yeah, just some other feedback if moving forward with arts and cultural, if we want to do the banners, if we could look into using their funding as opposed to general fund. And then I think in regards to maybe this pickleball venture, if maybe starting out with that $1,000 ticket item of just striping, co-striping of like a couple of the courts or something, just to see like if it works out. I mean, it does sound like it's a community interest, so I'm sure it would get use out of it, but maybe that's where we could start with that instead of moving forward with like a huge project right out the gate. But I also wanted to agree with Jamie that I don't think a consultant would necessarily be needed for that. And obviously community outreach, but I think that's something that we could probably handle ourselves. And I really want to press I guess it was a public works piece, but it has to do with the police department facilities. That is going to be huge on my to-do. I really want to see that move forward. I'm hugely in support of that. So I just want that to be known. And I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a lot of comments here, so hopefully I won't take too long. I wanted to start out when I saw the high-level budget principles under the section of public improvement. I thought it sounded, I mean, I think Jamie specifically asked like what we think about that. I thought it had somewhat of an overemphasis on the pavement management system, which I think is critical, but I think it, notably didn't talk about bike or very much pedestrian infrastructure. So I wonder if there's a way to maybe add those to the list under public improvement. But maybe that's a longer discussion for another time if we're going to be rethinking these high level budget principles. But I do think it's important if we're having principles that are going to guide our budget, that it's like, it sounds like we're just going to maximize all of our funding for pavement management, which I don't, necessarily agree with. I think that's a little bit too simple. That's one comment I had. Moving down the list, I'm very supportive of the 41st Avenue Visioning Plan. I think that's a really great program, and I'd love to see more economic development initiatives like that. So I'm just want to express my support for that. I also wanted to say that I think it's really important that we achieve the commitments that we made in the housing element, like was expressed by the letter from YIMBY, and I just want to make sure that those commitments are prioritized. I know there's a lot going on in the city and in the planning department, but I think those are very important because we don't want to, once our housing element is approved, we don't want it to fall out of the good grace of HCD. Regarding the short-term versus long-term planning for the wharf, I'm not a huge advocate of splitting those up. But I don't have a strong opinion on that, but what I do have a strong opinion on is that we're very clear in what is going to be considered short-term and what's going to be considered long-term. I think a decision like making those types of improvements on the wharf in the short term will carry a lot of momentum and will be very difficult to change according to our long-term plans. So I think that as we're developing these strategies, we're very clear, like if we're doing something short-term, like what's the end date of this and what's the beginning of the long-term, and that people know that the short-term, strategy isn't the same as the long-term, and being very clear in that. So, the public outreach and information services item, I think that's important, and it didn't have a huge expense. I wonder if we could fit that back in somehow. I think, what was it, like $1,000 or something? And sounds like it's something analogous to a Canva subscription, but whatever that is, I think the more outreach we can do, the better.
Which item is it?
It was under city manager.
That was one of the unfunded elements in the city manager's department. Just for those of you who haven't noticed, I'm doing my best to kind of record quick notes. So if you keep an eye on them, and if I'm capturing what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the bilingual was included in the funded, but this was unfunded. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was some of the scheduling software around our social media work.
Whatever. I mean, city's doing great at social media, but whatever we can do to support that, I think it's really important. So, yeah, the pickleball, I'm in favor of looking into it. Start identifying sites and talking to neighbors and talking to the community. I think it's amazing how much, to what extent public space is being utilized by pickleball players around the county. And I know it's controversial and has noise issues associated with it, but just seeing that many people out and about is pretty inspiring. I'd love to see our public spaces utilized to that extent.
Forgive me, I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
gonna jump in on the pickleball thing really
Shoot.
quickly. Just so two things to think about. Number one is this is one of these projects where I think if we put our toe in the water, we're getting in the pool. Like, if we do a temporary striping project on the courts, we're gonna hear from the tennis players, and then there's gonna be a lot of discussion around whether or not, that's appropriate. And so I think that if ultimately make a decision that pickleball doesn't stay there, I think there'd be a lot of pressure then to kind of dive into the larger project of finding the space for it. I think, my wife is teaching pickleball right now. I play it as well. I see the demand out there. Everyone recognizes that. I think the question just comes down to like where we're going to have the resources to do the community process, to meet with the neighbors, to figure out where that's going to happen. And it's, something we can do. I think we would just have to look at something that's pretty significant kind of coming off.
Mhm.
That's the challenge. It's not, I think, everyone recognizes the need. There's just a lot of needs.
Well, personally, I would say that rather than take something off, I'd just like to see it included in the list, but possibly, you know, in the status of like grayed out, but something to be looked at if staff time opens up. I mean, these are all huge estimates of what, you know, how much staff time is going to take. So we don't know what's going to happen. But I think it's good to have it on paper as something that, you know, I support at least if
That it was actually kind of the intent of the grade. In a sense, it was almost a starting place for next year,
Yeah.
potentially for the council as like,
time opens up.
yeah, that these are things that certainly everyone has acknowledged are important projects and I think you said it exactly right, is kind of like as bandwidth maybe opens up and as maybe a starting.
And that's perfect for my last two things. I have two initiatives that I would love to see added to the gray list. I know we have so much on our plate and really important things, but I think these are important projects too that I'd like to see put on the list. And if as staff time comes up or next year, just that I've been thinking about them. One is to try to achieve more electric vehicle charging stations around the city. Most likely, I think that would be working with a third party company that does that, but just utilizing more of our parking spaces to equip them with that. I think the demand is growing quickly. It's important for you know, environmental sustainability. So love to see that. And then I would like to see the city explore the possible impacts of implementing a living wage ordinance, similar to what was done in the city and the county of Santa Cruz, which are both slightly different, I believe, but basically means that looking into whether or not the city of Capitola should restrict who we work with to those that pay a living wage in the county, essentially. And that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Brooks?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to give council a heads up. I did meet with the Monty Foundation today, and they're going to be pivoting in order to support, obviously, the fireworks show when they can and Jade Street. And I know that was mentioned that they were going to possibly be supporting the skate park, but I think they might be pivoting. I just learned that. So I just wanted to let staff be aware of that too. The short-term, long-term strategic plan, my goodness, there's 3 things happening simultaneously and it gets tricky. I think what would just be helpful, the schedule makes complete sense. I'm in alignment with Mayor Brown on what that would look like because we want to be as clear to our community as possible. It's almost as easy as just wording. I look at that document and it says community meeting, that should say like long-term use community meeting, you know, and we just have to just be consistent across the board. The temporary permits for short-term things. And I say that because what I don't want to see, and this is just that we're favoring other things versus another, and that we're following our process and the bureaucratic process of long-term strategies and planning and all of that sort of stuff. So I just want us to be really transparent with the community around that. The continuation of the gun buyback program is really important to me, and I'd love to see that continue on. There's no money needed for that. I really did appreciate our chief working with the other chiefs of police and just having that community discussion. I think your leadership really helped move that forward. And so it kind of triggered them to, oh, no pun intended, it promoted them to have that conversation. So I was just really proud of that work and I hope to see that happen again. I'd like for staff, this has no money, required, but I'm hoping we've received so much support for our park. I'm not asking for more today, but there might just be opportunities for us to apply for grants in the future down the line for the park. So I'd just like for us to keep our eyes open. Council can keep our eyes open for funding for that. I don't know. I think the process for this, I said I wasn't gonna ask for money. That we do have some funding in art and cultural, and I'm wondering if there's some opportunity to work with the Treasure Cove partners to see if we can also see some of that art and cultural piece implanted at the park. So if there is any wiggle room there, because I know we have some funds in art and cultural, so I don't know if that's um, when we see the new design, it's going to come, I think, in the fall. When we come back with the update, once we reach 750,000. So I'm just wondering if there's some opportunity there to get our art and cultural in the mix with the project. Is that making sense? Or ask?
Over at our Art and Cultural Commission guru here.
Okay. Yeah, yes, possibly, maybe.
Thank you. I would need to maybe kind of understand a little more on the idea there, but I think the first thing would be to just double check if it would fall under the list of an eligible artwork.
Yeah.
The Public Art Fund Code is very clear about what is not allowed to be used for public art. And also as part of the master plan, the commission's art master plan, there's a very clear process as to the selection of an artist for a commissioned art piece for a particular purpose. And so I do know that like within the design of the plan, identifying a space that a public art piece could be installed has been part of the conversation. And so that would actually already be included in the project, that space. And then the commission would be drawn into a concept, what they would like to see that would fit within that space, and then do the typical call to artists as part of what is outlined within the master plan for that process.
That's some ideas I was thinking, like the donor wall could just be really beautiful, and how, if that falls into the criteria, we have some ideas came up with like gaming tables, and what could that look like? So, I mean, I'm sure the opportunities are endless, but I just wanted to throw it out there to see if there was some sort of partnership opportunity to get the commission working on this project.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look at the code and check with the city attorney to see if there might be an opportunity there.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I completely hear the issues around the pickleball. I have played it twice. I get it. It's fun. I think that we should try. I mean, let's look at it. Let's try to figure it out. To Councilmember Peterson's point, seeing people outside and playing in fresh air is so important. Seeing people of all ages. And so we'll dip our toe. I'm down to dip the toe in the pool. Dip the toe. We're going swimming. And to Councilmember Peterson's thoughts on just bike and pedestrian advocacy, I think that's just great. We're working with Ecology Action. That just makes sense. So I'm in agreement there with them. As well as the the parking, the charging stations, and possibly looking at golf cart charging stations. And some opportunities there. That would be really neat. And I'm happy to also help facilitate that conversation with 3CE as a policy member. Thanks to all of you appointing me onto that position. And that is it. That's all I have. Oh, I just want to make an overall comment that there's so much work that we've accomplished in the last several years, at least since I've been on, and what our council has been on. And so even if we have minimal dollars, it's okay. Like, we're getting so much done and accomplished. And I just want to, again, say thank you to the staff for listening to us, pushing those initiatives, and supporting the community in a way that I'm very proud of. So thank you.
Right. I just have a couple comments. So medians and wharf, okay, you've already got that one. I noticed that there's a total of $201,000 to program, but it's $222,000 in general funds. So do we need to cut $20,000 worth of projects?
I think that would make Jim and I more comfortable, but I mean, honestly, at this point, we're kind of within the margin of error.
Okay.
So as long as we're in this kind of ballpark picture, we could pull that number down a little bit. I did hear an idea about shifting the banners to the art fund, which would
Yeah.
have a slight positive general fund impact if that's something the council supported.
Yeah.
I guess then also there was Councilmember Peterson talked about the 5K in the CM department, so that would go the other direction. So
Yeah, okay, so I agree with moving the 3,000 for the banners to the public art fund. What about the median art and utility box murals? Is that not also potentially public art?
fortunately, that one isn't.
Was that not public
Okay.
art?
Yeah, maintenance of public art is explicitly
Uh,
not included. Now, you know, we haven't been maintaining it very well for a long time, and this is a very difficult budget year. So, you know, it may or may not be a priority for this council this year.
Can we cut it from 10 to 5? They have 10,000 for utility box murals.
The 10,000 was just a benchmark to get it started to see what. Yeah, I think we.
Can we cut it to 5? Okay, let's start there. Let's move that. I'm excited about the wharf revisioning, the public outreach, the temporary structure, all of that. I'm glad to see this go forward. As I already stated, I think it's important to keep the short and long-term wharf planning together. And I would like to consider moving the city's strategic planning to the fall so that we can finish the wharf planning first. And get that open. Let's see what else. Public art, portable stage. Oh, the daylighting requirements, regardless of if we're looking for alternatives or if it's just gonna happen, I think that should be brought to the BIA for their consideration and discussion. I'll mention it to them at the meetings as the BIA representative, but I just think that city staff should reach out to the BIA and talk to them about that. I don't know if it requires any funding, but I just want to confirm the Mayor for a Day program that we did last year. We doing that again this year? Yeah, I'd like us to do that again. I'd like that to be ongoing as long as it doesn't require any funding. And then I'm just really curious about what this rapid wedding event is. Is that like a group wedding, or is it like people who just come in and are like, we want to get married right now? Yeah, it's like
Kind of. Kind of. Yeah. So like I said, this has been done in agencies within our county in a similar way. But yeah, the idea is that you would get your 20-minute wedding slot and you would sign up for it, but you'd have to do all of the pre-work and
it would be like one day.
yeah, but it would be like the city would do like 10 in a day, one right after the other. So it would be like several groups would
How
kind of
fun.
move through and take advantage of a wedding venue that's set up, and then it's instead of for one, it's for 10. And then, you know, the opportunities to potentially partner with the businesses for reception dinners or something along those lines. So there's a lot of details to kind of sort out, but it was an idea that a lot of the event planners in the city are very excited to try.
That is so fun. Yeah, I love this. Please, can you please make sure that the people that sign up for this know that city council members can legally marry them?
Okay.
So that if anyone decides they want to pick a council member to marry them, I think that would be a fun little opportunity for both the couples and the council members. I've never married anyone before.
I completely agree.
And so, nope.
No, you don't have to be ordained. Oh, wait, you are ordained?
Um,
Oh, okay. Well, throw that in there too.
Everybody
that-
needs it.
Otherwise, maybe we should add to the goals requiring all of the council members to become Ordain. Just kidding. Okay, thank you. I was just curious. That's really exciting. Okay, I think those might have been all of my, huh? Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had a question about that also, the WRF working group. I agree. I think that's a good idea. I was on the WRF working group a while back. But I think, yeah, it would probably, I'll see what council thinks, but maybe start as an ad hoc committee with 2 council members and staff and then determine from there who would be an appropriate stakeholder to add, or what do you think?
Yeah, that'd be great. I would volunteer.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to volunteer for that as well. You have questions or a comment on it? No?
I guess just for clarity in the community input piece of it and how that all works, it sometimes can get a little convoluted. And so when, I guess I was just thinking out loud of just making sure how that information is then collaborated. Yeah, with the short-term thinking and then the long-term thinking. And then when we get to fall for the strategic, like all of those things, I have a little concern that it might just, those who are heavily in it, like our current owners or other folks, will get the say, but we're missing some other pieces. So I'm just speaking out loud that there might be some things we miss. So I think it's fine. I just want us to be very caution that there might be some missteps if we're meeting on the side. My thought.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking a little bit, if I'm understanding right, maybe along the same lines of, I would just want to make sure that the ad hoc committee their purpose is to facilitate progress of the plan, but not to be a decision-making body, but rather,
Yeah, no ad hoc committees or
Yeah.
decision-making bodies.
Okay.
I appreciate the clarification though, yeah.
That actually is really helpful. So if the ad hoc committee helps advise us on outreach process, I think that's really good. It's very good to be clear on that. Are you advising us on sort of outcomes or outreach? If it's
Yeah,
outreach,
absolutely.
I think that's helpful for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Sorry, you probably said this. The grayed out items are not included in the total.
This year's goal.
This year's,
Right.
right, those have
Okay,
been
okay, I just wanted to make sure.
important projects. The biggest, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So there's no vote tonight. So this was all just feedback and yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't mind a vote,
Oh, okay.
because there was a lot of different ideas here. I think the biggest one really comes down to the pickleball.
That's
really
the
get-
biggest one.
I know. I think internally we're all a little bit nervous about it. So
Haven't spoke to the pickleball, so could I jump in on that?
yeah, go ahead.
I think it is a great idea, but I think we should start at the lowest step by probably just repurposing some stripes at a facility that we already have. See how that goes before we try to go find a new place to build these courts, because that could be more extreme cost. But in the meantime, we could, make it available in Capitola where you can play pickleball and not have to go to Bromer Street, and go from there. That doesn't seem like it makes sense.
Am I just not getting it? Like, can you not have a tennis court and a pickleball stripe on? And I know, let me think about this a little bit. Let me rephrase the question. I have experience in the 2 times I played in the Aptos, that Aptos club, the clubs, where they have a pool and they have pickleball and they Seascape, and they both exist there, and it is a tennis club. So I guess my point is I like Councilmember Peterson and Clark's idea of let's try it and then wait and see and hope. But I also like the gray idea that you said, like put it at our lowest priority. Because I think that's what you said, right? Like let's keep it as a gray item. Find the $20,000 in savings and then get there if we can get there.
By
think that'd be my
restriping
direction.
or adding the striping and the nets, that'd be our lowest cost. So, and if we can do that at Jade Street.
I just want to comment on that, and maybe it's what you're about to say too, but I think the issue with restriping, and I love pickleball, like I'm obsessed with pickleball, but I understand the concerns with that are that pickleball is so popular that it has taken over a lot of the available tennis courts from the tennis players. So tennis players don't particularly like it, and then neighbors don't particularly like it because the ball makes a loud noise when it hits the paddle. So those are the two like concerns about like why maybe we wouldn't want to just jump right into striping.
Oh, wait, I have a recommendation just really quick. I've noticed on the slide that it says community engagement necessary. So can we just make this a moot point for now and say maybe do a community survey on if they want striping for a pickleball court at the tennis? Because if there's community outrage about how much noise it's going to be, then probably just shouldn't do it. And if people come out of the, just everyone has something to say about how important it is to have a pickleball court, then we can revisit it.
So if I could, I'm gonna just take us a few steps back, but I'll get there.
Okay.
So currently in recreation, what is probably a weekly process for us is we have conflicts on our existing tennis courts because individuals are coming to play pickleball. And the tennis courts are currently posted for tennis use only. Tennis and pickleball are culturally two very different groups of individuals showing up to this sport. And so it is a regular source of conflict. Since it is currently posted as a tennis only, recreation staff is pulled out of their office to go and have conversations with the individuals that are playing pickleballs on our current tennis courts. We have tennis players that are coming in, making comments as to the activities that are out there. So there is currently a high level of conflict surrounding this issue. And so a reason why in the presentation this is listed as a very high staff yield project is because a really great place to start with this project is community engagement. However, because it is already such a highly contentious conversation, those community engagement experiences would need to be done very well. And the current bandwidth does not allow for us to facilitate that to the appropriate level in order to have a healthy, productive conversation as to where the city might vision this in the future. So it is definitely, community engagement is exactly the right place for us to start, but we really need to do that well. And we need the bandwidth in order to be able to do that. Does that help answer questions?
Like you might also need police presence if it starts to get out of hand.
Potentially.
Okay. So how do we feel about what we just heard?
I wonder if this shouldn't just come back at its own time under its own agenda item. Because I mean, it's a complicated process. I mean, and I think we need to talk about it more, quite frankly. But it is also one of things I think either all of us or all but one of us has explicitly stated that we're in favor of out of all of these goals. So yeah. So I think it's worth, if not deciding today to move forward, then to bring it up at another city council meeting and talk about it more in depth.
I would just recommend that then we move forward with a robust $1,000 survey to the community. That would be my recommendation, and see what we get and then bring it back to council per council member.
Does it cost
Peterson.
$1,000 to put out a survey?
No.
So then staff could,
$100.
how much, it doesn't cost anything, right? It's just staff time to put out a survey and then bring us back the results without doing any, public engagement process otherwise, like without any in-person potential for conflict and fisticuffs kind of issues.
So I actually think that Councilmember Peterson's first suggestion was probably what my suggestion would be is that we consider pickleball projects as bandwidth allows. It's basically sort of a grant project. And the challenge with sort of kicking off some survey work is that there becomes an expectation that there's going to be progress. And you sort of I don't know, if you activate an activist group. So
Pickleball activist groups?
Yeah.
there are.
But I feel
whole
like
new
it's
world.
already happening. It's already happening. They're activated.
Yeah.
There's police presence necessary. And I think if council were to have this conversation again, we would say, let's go out and survey the community. I mean, you're hearing it from me. I can look over at my fellow council members here, but I think if we were asked the question on an agenda later on, it would be the same answer. Let's survey and see what happens. And then we can make that decision when we get the results. With no money needed, I think that's a fair goal to try. Because they're already activated all over the place.
Second that.
Thank you.
Survey? Okay. Online survey?
Can we wait?
Put
till
it, you
it's
can,
done?
you can put it, you
Can
don't
we wait
need to
till
do
tomorrow?
it tomorrow.
This is a
Yeah, you don't
priority.
need to do, this is gray. This is the gray
Yeah,
line.
still gray.
Still
Still gray.
No, gray means it's just not gonna happen.
Oh, gray.
No, it doesn't. Gray doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It means it's not a priority for this fiscal year.
Right, but it means that it's not gonna happen unless something else changes this fiscal year.
That's correct. And I think since we have a wharf and a strategic plan and a housing element and it's like some really big projects,
have
that
it
this is
like
exciting, but pickleball isn't high priority, in my opinion.
Light gray.
Light gray.
Light gray.
Yeah, why don't we
You
like?
don't need to do it
maybe we can
tomorrow.
revisit it
Yeah.
in next spring or something.
Perfect.
That's 5-0. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
let's do that.
I won't be here. So it's the perfect time. Just kidding. Okay. All right. So we have all of our recommendations.
It's run the survey in the spring. I just want us to be really clear about that.
Nice.
Is that what it is, or is it
Yes.
revisit? We have an item with the council.
No, it's
Run the
run the
survey in the
survey in the spring is what I want.
Next spring or this spring? I heard next year.
Next spring.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's survey, spring.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
It's
Should
the
I-
24, 25. These are all 24, 25, right? I
Yeah.
mean, these are all,
Yeah,
we're not,
well,
Okay.
I mean,
that's,
the wharf project, we are going to be kicking off sooner than the new
Yeah.
fiscal year.
I just,
Trying to drop should I drop the fund, Nisi? So you can see more? Or is this as small as I should go?
I feel like we've come to a general consensus.
I have one thing I wanted to add.
the one that says shift 30 to another project, I just want you to know that that's not received funding from the Monty Foundation. Yeah, so I don't want to have any misconception that there's dollars already in the coffers for that.
What wording would you be?
Yeah, but
Just, it was an FYI to staff that there's no funding for the skate park. At this,
So
that,
just take it off?
Yeah,
You don't need
just-
it. It
you
doesn't
don't
need to
need
be
it.
there.
You
It was
don't need
just
it.
a comment to staff.
yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's just a comment to staff that the pump track might not have funding.
I know, but you don't anymore.
So just take it off of there altogether.
I just want add a modification too. Okay,
so it's not that, it's remove.
No. Wait, do you actually want it removed from here or do you just not want it on there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. I guess not.
Not literally. Yeah, you're okay.
That's okay. I literally wasn't, so.
Okay,
Okay.
so the question, I think we've achieved consensus around
no,
the pick.
I have one more thing though.
Okay,
I want to edit my note. Yes, on support 45th positioning plan. I want to add also support general economic development initiatives as staff time allows. In addition to the 41st, I think that's really important. Thank you.
Right. So you said you'd prefer a vote?
well, the question here is there's a couple budgetary items on here, and if council is in agreement, basically with everything on here, I think the net general fund impact is effectively zero. We've moved 50K from Esplanade Park into the wharf and into the medians. We cut art maintenance by 5K, added 5K CM Department Public Outreach, and then 3K, I guess, for shifting from the banners to the art fund. So we're 3K to the good. I think speak now if there's anything on this list that doesn't look like priority to you, and we could consider holding a vote. Otherwise, if there's council consensus, I think we're okay.
So next steps would be these goals are put into the budget document that's going to come back to us. And then if, I know that we were talking about the, what was it? The one that's coming out of the Green Building Fund? The 50,000, that's an estimate. So if that comes in less, that might make some changes. So generally, these goals will be put in the budget. That'll come back to us in the first budget hearing. And then throughout the year, if projects become more or less expensive, we will be informed of the fact that we need more money or more money is available to us, correct?
Yeah.
Based on the fact that we've all kind of stopped talking, I'm assuming that we're all generally in consensus. No one's angry about any of this? Okay. All right. You want to vote still?
No,
Okay.
we're good.
All right.
All right.
Go team. Great job. Thank you, staff, for all of your hard work every day, all the time, constantly, even in the face of ever-changing requests. Really appreciate it. Okay, with that, the council will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled council meeting on March 14th at 6 p.m. Until then, thank you all very much. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Meeting is adjourned. All right.